Yo, 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 baby, it's the new T-Rex 6. I've got the full program and all the available modules to show you. So let's get into it with a bit of a deep dive, yeah? Okay, so what's new with T-Rex 6? Well, the GUI has had a complete makeover, so it's more compact and bijou now. There is a new, much more advanced preset management system, which actually seems to have been taken from Amplitude 5, because it's the same as the one in that. And now when you go to save, manage and create your presets, etc., you can give them categories such as a type, an instrument type, a character, or a genre. You can put in an artist name, a song name, keywords and description, and you can tick presets to put them into a favourites list, yeah? So a much more advanced preset management system now. And actually, if you look at this pop-up preset browser there, or the chain preset area over here on the main program, you can see that I've imported all my old presets, including the legacy stuff, from T-Rex 5. It's really easy to do that if you've got the previous T-Rex. You just go to the disk location, copy all your old presets, including any producer patch stuff like the Tom Lord Alge stuff, etc., and then you paste it into the same location for the T-Rex 6 installation, and then you've got all your presets ready to go, and they're fully compatible with T-Rex 6. So, a new reworked GUI and a more advanced preset management system. What else is new? Well, we've now got the new Modules Manager, which is like the old T-Rex custom shop, and it does what it says on the tin. All the available modules for T-Rex 6 are listed here in the Modules Manager, and from the Modules Manager here you can put them into trial mode, you can purchase them from here, so you can do all the management of all available modules directly inside T-Rex from the new Modules Manager. Okay, what else we got? Well, there's the new master bus. And it's a really important one, this, because now all clips in the clip list can be mastered through the same mastering chain on this new master bus. And it only has 4 insert points, but that's more than enough to set up a traditional mastering chain. The new master bus features equal gain and a master bypass. There's a master trim, plus minus 3 dB, and you can chuck the whole thing into mono if you want to do mono checking. And we can also see that in the master bus, every single individual module has its own dedicated input-output meter, and that's the same now in the traditional chain view on clips. Every module in the chain now has its own input and output meter. So that's the new master bus. Really important, this one. Okay, and let me just explain the significance of this new master bus for people who've never used T-Rex before. Okay, so look, over here we have the clip list, and these are typically tracks from the same album mix session. They've all got the same mix on, and they're sitting in T-Rex now waiting to be mastered. Now with the old T-Rex, what you do is you would set up a mastering chain of processors on one of those clips, tweak the chain to get the sound you want, and then save that chain as a preset and then load it onto the other clips. And then you render all those clips out of T-Rex, and they all have that same mastering chain applied to them. Okay, now you can still work that way if you want, but we now have the new master bus. So we can set up a core mastering chain here, and individual clips can be loaded into T-Rex, and they don't have to have any processing applied to them at all. We can simply load all our clips into the clip list, and then render all of them through that master bus mastering chain, and have that same master bus mastering chain applied to all clips. Easy peasy, right? But we're free to also mix and match. We can apply processing to any individual clip, maybe to do something corrective to an individual clip, or just to have a pre-master bus chain of processors on individual clips first. And then all of those clips can be sent out and rendered through the final master bus mastering chain. Okay, and that just leaves one new feature for the new T-Rex 6, and that is that there are 8 new modules. These are the modules down the side here. They're the processors, EQs, compressors, that kind of thing, yeah? And these modules or processors can be used to build processing chains inside of T-Rex, but they all work as standalone plugins in their own right in any DAW. And they can be installed in VST3, audio unit, or AAX formats. So there are 8 new modules for T-Rex 6. Let's check them out. Okay, and the first of those 8 new modules is this one, Master Match X, which is the new revamped version of the old Master Match found in previous versions of T-Rex. Okay, now like the old Master Match, Master Match X allows you to load up to 3 reference audio files. It will then analyze those files to extract the EQ curve, and then it will match your unmastered clip to the EQ curve of the reference material. And what seems to happen is if you load in more than one reference file to analyze for the EQ curve, then it will give you the average of the 2 or 3 tracks that you've loaded in. Okay, best way is to see this in action because it's really very good. So here in the clip list, these are tracks mixed from the door from an album that I recorded for a band. So they are unmastered tracks. Okay, and this is one of them. Okay, and then over here, I've got some specially prepared material. Now this is the same track, but it's been mixed so that it's bass heavy with all the treble rolled off. Same as this track, right? But all the treble taken off. So we're going to load that in as our reference file, and we're going to try and take the EQ curve from this. Okay, now there's no manual for Master Match X, but there are these left-right locators. Master Match X wants you to play a loud part of the file for it to analyze, so I presume that you put these over the bit of the file you want Master Match X to analyze. Okay, so we hit analyze, and that's waiting for audio playback. When you hit play, the clip you loaded in to be analyzed, you won't hear that clip. Okay, but it is being analysed in the background. When you hit play, what you'll hear playing is your unmastered clip, the one that you want to match to the reference material that you just loaded in. Okay, so we hit play. And hit match. Now you probably in real life would let the analysis go on for longer, but there's the EQ curve taken from this very bass heavy version of the track. And let's listen to that on our unmastered version of the track. Okay, this is what it sounds like without the curve. And this is with the curve that we just extracted. Okay, it's not really there, is it? And what seems to happen is it extracts the EQ curve from reference material, and then the EQ match, which is the EQ gain, is set here at 12 o'clock, which it says is 100%, but it's actually not. That's about 50% of the curve. If you push this right up to 200%, then you get a match for the curve that you just extracted. Now have a listen to it. And that now does match the reference that we used. Yeah, it does it really well, yeah. Okay, now there's that EQ curve extracted from that bass heavy material, and it's now in my user EQ list here as untitled, so I'm just going to rename it, and we're going to call it Bass Heavy Duty Rock and Roll. There it is. Okay, let's do another one. If you want to bring in another clip to analyze, you need to click this reanalyze here. See above the input control here, reanalyze. So we click that, and now we can drag in another clip to be analyzed. But there's a bug. Okay, now this is not a show-stopping bug, and you know they've just released this T-Rack 6, so we can allow them a couple of small bugs. And the bug is this: if you click reanalyze and come back to this place to load in another clip to be analyzed, when you drag and drop it into this analysis area, it doesn't load the clip into here. It actually drops it into the clip list here as if it's being put into the list of tracks waiting to be mastered. So the way around this is you click reanalyze to get to this bit. Just choose a different clip from your clip list, go back to the clip you're actually working on, and then you can load a new reference file. So I'm going to load a new one in. This is another version of the same track, but this time it's been mixed so that it's all treble with no bass. Okay. Let me just get this right. Okay. So we'll analyse it. Again, when I hit play, we won't hear that treble heavy version that I've just dropped in as the reference to be analysed. We will just hear the unmastered clip that we're going to match to the reference material. Here we go. I don't know what it's time to take. Look again, my love is all over and saying what's out. Oh no, time, love, listen, love. It's only them back and all the time. Everyone's trying it, everyone I find it, everyone they find it, Hit match. Again, in real life, you probably would have let the analysis go on for longer. And there is the treble heavy curve extracted from that reference file. And again, like with the bass heavy curve, we need to push the gain of the curve right up, like that. And now it's going to match the reference. This is the reference. And this is the curve, but now boosted on our normal material. Yeah, and that is spot on, isn't it? Really good, really good. So again, in the user EQ preset list here, there it says untitled. That's the treble heavy curve that we just extracted from that file. So I'll just rename that. We'll call this one treble heavy. And okay, now we can switch between them. That's the bass heavy one. And that's the treble heavy one. And they really are an incredibly good match for the originals that the EQ curves were taken from. It's very clever the way it works, I have to say. Okay, so that's like extracting EQ curves from reference material. But with this new Master Match X, if we click this reanalyze again, just there above the input control, and come back to this bit, Master Match X now includes factory EQ curves. You don't need to analyze reference material if you want an EQ curve. There are these factory ones, and the old Master Match didn't have this. So I'm going to choose the indie factory curve and apply it to my unmastered clip. Now we click analyze because it wants to listen to your unmastered clip before it applies the factory curve. Okay, so here we go. I don't know what it's time to take. Look again, my love is all over and saying what's out. Oh no, time, love, listen. And hit match, and there's the indie curve applied to my unmastered clip, and it sounds like this. Okay, now when you apply one of these factory curves, the reason why it wants to analyze your unmastered clip is so that it can listen to it and see what the overall EQ curve is for your unmastered clip. Then it will apply the factory preset EQ curve, and it will tweak that curve based on the EQ curve it finds on your unmastered material. So this clip of mine here, if it was bass heavy, then Master Match X would apply the indie preset curve, but with the bass end rolled down to compensate for the fact that my unmastered clip is bass heavy. Or if my unmastered clip is bass light, it will apply the indie curve with the bass boosted to compensate for that. Or if my unmastered clip is very treble heavy, it will apply the indie curve with the treble rolled off to compensate for that. And if my unmastered clip is very light on the treble is rolled down, then it will apply the indie curve with the treble boosted to compensate for that. That's why it wants to analyze your unmastered clip, so it can compensate the factory curve to fit. And to show you how well it can do that, look at this. This is the bass heavy version of the track, but now it's in the clip list as a regular track waiting to be mastered. And it's all bass with all the treble rolled off. So we're going to apply the same indie preset to that, but Master Match X will analyze this clip first and find that it has no treble. So we'll apply the indie curve, but with all the treble boosted to compensate for that. Here we go. Hit match, and there's the indie EQ curve, but boosted from the low mids all the way up, 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 up. It goes uphill, boosting all the way up into the treble frequencies. And again, like with the two EQ curves we extracted from reference material earlier, to get a proper balance, we need to boost the EQ curve right up to somewhere close to 200% or even 200% depending. Now with this curve boosted, you can see that it's boosting the treble up and up and up and up to compensate for the fact that the clip it's applying this indie curve to doesn't have any treble, and now it will match. Have a listen to this. So that is the bass heavy version with the compensated indie curve applied. And this is the flat version with the indie curve applied. And they are, near as damn it, they are really they're so close. It's remarkable the way it's done that when you consider that this version of the file has just got no upper mid and treble information at all. It's really done a good job. Okay, so once you've got your EQ curve loaded into Master Match X, whether it came from a factory preset or from reference material, you can then see the controls. So we've got an input level, and you can bring in a vintage API preamp model there, which sounds very nice indeed, even when it's being pushed quite subtly. We know this is an EQ gain. Back it all the way off and the EQ curve becomes flat. So you can give it as much boost or back it off as you want to that curve. But there's this wonderful sort of tilt EQ that works with the EQ curve itself. Now the curve always stays there at whatever amount of boost you've given it, but this tilts it, sort of thing. So brighter that way, rolling off the bottom end, darker that way, rolling off the top end. It works very, very well, this. Yeah, and then there's this warmth control. Well, look, there's no manual for Master Match X, as I said earlier, so I don't really know what this does. I'm not sure I hear it doing something. You know, if I roll this towards dark and boost the input a bit and then start pushing this up, I think I hear a very, very low bottom end warmth subtly being brought in. I don't know what it's my love is all over and same oh no time love it's only them back and all the time everyone's whining. Yeah, you sort of hear something, but I don't know. I really don't know what that is, but I think that's what it's doing. Okay. Maybe IK Multimedia can tell us. Now, what else is there? You can put the EQ into linear phase EQ. Probably add some CPU loading, but nowadays that won't make much difference, will it? We've got powerful enough computers. And there's a compressor here with a gain reduction meter, and it can be in gentle, balanced, or hard, and you do hear the difference. I don't know what it's my love is all over and same oh no time love it's only them back and all the time everyone's whining, everyone's fighting, everyone's Yep. And then limiter. You can bring on limiting more and more and more until you peg it hard, and it will not go over 0.1 dB. I don't know what it's my love is all over and same oh no time love it's only them back and all the time everyone's whining, everyone. While we're on the subject, these meters on the input and output are very good for just a single module. They're quite comprehensive with peak RMS and LUFS levels. Okay. There's a reset button over here which just resets these controls but doesn't reset the EQ curve, and then there's an on-off switch to just bring the processor in and out, but it doesn't have equal gain. I don't know what it's but really, you'd use this Master Match X on the new master bus, and if you were using it here, then you could apply the equal gain, and when you bring it in and out, you'll just hear the difference in the processor, and the gain will remain the same whether it's in or out. So that's really where you'd use Master Match X in this final chain. Okay. Now there's this stereo enhance section here. This is brilliant. Okay, it's got a mono maker as well, which is set to off 20 Hertz by default, but I'll type a value in here. You can type values, or you can push and drag it around. It goes up to 300 Hertz. And with the slider at the default 0 position, the regular amount of stereo width of the track passes through, but below the mono maker frequency, it sums to mono. Okay. Let me put this at 100 Hertz. Now you can push the stereo image wider and wider, and the stereo enhancer is very good indeed. But below the mono maker frequency, it's summed to mono.
I don't know when it's time to take a look again. My love is all over and singing my song. Oh no, time, love, low. It's only them back and all the time. Everyone's trying it.
But if you start bringing this down from 0, you're pushing the track more and more and more towards mono until here it is mono.
I don't know when it's time to take a look again. My love is all over and singing my song. Oh no.
In which case, obviously, the mono maker frequency doesn't matter if it's on anything other than off. Okay, so I'll just put it back to default. It's a really good little stereo enhancer, that. And the mono maker is a very useful addition. It really is. So there's that. But there's more. You can edit the EQ. It's bonkers, this. There's just more and more. There's a low and high filter you can bring in, and you can type the values in for those. Once they're added, then the EQ curve only works in between the added low and high filter. And whether or not you're using the high and low filter, you can also add up to 8, count them, 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm double clicking to insert those. You can add up to 8 peak bands. Yeah, right click to get rid of. And they work whether or not you're using the upper and lower filter. Right click to get rid of. I've just got 2 here now. And what's interesting about these is they drag the curve around that exists. Right, it's really quite clever. They've got quite tight Q if you want to get really surgical with them. Okay. Like that. And they're very clever, these. Like, so say that's my curve, right? And I sort of say, well, I like this EQ curve with that amount of boost, because I like what it's doing up here in this area. But at that amount of boost, this bump here, I'm not too keen on it. Well, you can put in a peak node like that, and then with fairly wide Q, just drag that curve down at that point as narrow or wide as you want. And you still get the overall curve with all of its movement and bumps, but you're just dragging down a particular area or pushing up a particular area. And if I just exaggerate that and then put another bump there around 2.7K and push that up and exaggerate that as well, close the EQ edit, and those nodes remain as part of the overall curve, modifying the curve. And now you can push that curve up with the nodes added or back it off. But if you back it off and back it off and back it off to flat, then the curve disappears and only the nodes remain. Okay? Which also means, obviously, if you want to, you can back the curve off completely or not use one from the get-go and just build an EQ using these nodes. But as far as I can tell, there is no shelf. These are always peak. I don't think there's any way to change them to anything else. You know, you can't. They're just fixed peak bands. So there's no way to put a low and high shelf in or anything like that. Anyway, right click to get rid of, right click to get rid of, and bring back my curve. Yeah, so you've got that as well. It's very good, this. It is a very, very good little processor, I have to say. So that's Master Match X, and I really like it. I mean, it really does work. I'll be honest, I've used T-Rax for years, and it's a great program, but I've never really liked the old Master Match, and I never used to use it. But this one I would definitely use. It does a really good job of extracting EQ curves from reference material, so you can match your material EQ curve to released material from famous bands, famous artists, etc. if you want to. But also importantly, if a client comes back and says, oh, you know, we want you to mix some more stuff, remember you did it before, we really like that way you made it sound, you can just load in one of their old tracks, extract the EQ balance, the EQ curve for that, and impose it onto their new material. It's a really, really good and very useful little processor, that. And if you don't want to use these other controls, you don't have to, but it is a very, very good all-in-one processor as well. But if you want to, you can simply use it to extract the EQ curve from some material, or use one of the presets, and then just use that without the other controls, and then make that part of a chain and use, you know, other processors with it, different compressor and limiter separate from it, but just use it for the curve only. So it's really clever like that. It's a very, very good processor, this. I really, really like Master Match X. Okay, so that's the first of the 8 new modules. Let's check out the other 7. So here we are over in my DAW, which just happens to be Logic, but it could be any DAW. And here we can see the T-Rack suite working as a plugin inside a DAW. It can do that. We'll talk about that more at the end with the summing up. But let's now look at the other 7 of the new modules in T-Rack 6, starting with this one, Filter Fusion, which is a fantastic little filter. And it can be modulated by up to 3 different sources. And the joystick here allows you to blend between modulation sources. Now there are 5 different filter types: a low pass that works at 6, 12, 18 and 24 dB, a high pass that works at 6 dB an octave, a band pass that works at 6, 12 or 18, and a peak and notch that both work at 24 dB an octave respectively. I obviously don't have time to show you all the different filters, so I'll just go with the low pass at 6 dB. It's nice and wide, you can really hear it. Now, before we even get into modulating the filter itself has a really nice sound. Cut-off resonance drive and a really effective spreader. Okay, so let's have a listen to it on this Logic demo material. Yeah, I mean, it's a really nice sounding filter in its own right. And I'm going to modulate it now with the LFO, so I move the joystick here to LFO. The LFO here can be freeform for its timing, or sync it to the usual value. So I'm going to put it to quarters. There are 5 different waveforms and random, a retrigger, and this smoothing works really well to smooth the cycles as it goes around. I'm going to keep it in square on quarters, and we're going to modulate the filter, which we can do on any of these 3 parameters in either a negative or positive value. And what you find is that with these value sliders for the modulation, however the 3 different parameters are set to, that's just the starting point, and so the resonance can be pushed like way past where it is in either direction. Or the cutoff, or the drive. So yeah, we're modulating that now with quarters from the LFO. If I push this over now to the step sequencer, I've got the step sequencer here. It again can have its own internal BPM or sync to the usual values. It can have up to 16 steps, and it can work in forward, backward, back and forth, or random. Okay, so I'll leave it in forward. And at the maximum 16 steps, if I put this to 16 division, then obviously one cycle of the 16 steps is 1 bar, and if I set this to 30 seconds, then 2 cycles is a bar, etc. So if I set it to 8, then I'm getting 2 bars out of this, like that. So I'm going to put this to 30 seconds, and then we can modulate the different filter parts in positive or negative values with this. So I'm just going to set it like this, doing a sort of 30-second step thing, right? Just like that. Be nice if you could have presets to load into here and create them and save them. Okay, so now we're going to modulate the filter with the step sequencer. And now I can blend between the quarters of the LFO and the 30 seconds of the step sequencer like this. That's really cool, that. Put into backward, it's going to do it negative, positive, negative, positive. Etc. And it does back and forth. Come on. Back and forth. And random. We've got an envelope follower, which we can use to modulate the filter here. Okay, and now with this shaping my envelope, I can then have it also modulated by the LFO or the step sequencer as well, and a blend of the two. Yeah, it's a really cool little filter, this. It really is. I'm just scratching the surface with this thing. There's an input and an output and a dry wet control. Yeah, really good stuff. Really, really good. That is Filter Fusion. Okay, this is Delay Lab, which is a very interesting, fully featured delay with a few little twists. And again, I can only really touch the surface with this because there's so much to cover. But basically, there's an input and output. There's a wet-dry control. It can operate in mono, stereo, or ping-pong left-right. And there's a pan control. You've got a filter here, which the high pass goes up to 900 Hertz. And the low pass goes down to 500 Hertz with the Q. There's clipping, which you can bring in on the wet signal. There is bit reduction you can switch in. And there is downsampling you can switch in, and by default they go to the wet signal, but they can both be switched to the dry signal as well if you want. You can clock the delay to milliseconds or the usual times of your DAW, 8th, dotted, quarters, 16ths, etc. And the feedback control has a visual display. These little blue lozenges show you the repeats, and if you bring in the doubling, each repeat can have an increasingly loud or quiet, depending on how you set this, doubled flam note, and that helps you to sort of imitate sort of old tape delay type sounds or something in that ballpark, right? So look, I've got it on sort of 30% wet nearly, and it's just a standard 8th dotted on some drums, and it sounds like this. There's a gate here. I'll just bring that in and show you that straight away. The gate can be up so full that I'll put this on fully wet, that you get no wet signal at all. It's gating it completely. Then you can back that off and you start to get just the peaks of the repeats are coming through now. I'll just filter that a bit. Then let's blend some of that in with the dry. Do you know what I mean? You can do all that kind of thing. Make it a bit of a sharper filter. Bit of downsampling added to the wet. Etc. You know, you can do some interesting things with this. Let's try it. Let me just mute these drums. And I'm going to put it on this guitar here. So if I filter out the higher frequencies, bit of Q with this eighth dot, and then bring in some of the doubling. You know, we start getting into that almost tape-like territory. If I put this on quarters, you'll probably hear those flanged doubles better. Have a listen to this. Yeah, there's the bit reduction here. I'll put it on full wet so you can hear that. Bit of down sampling. Yeah, and if I put it on full wet, you can hear the clipping, which is on the wet signal only. Yeah, and you've got the mono. And the ping pong. It's a really interesting delay and get some really interesting sounds out of this. That is Delay Lab. Okay, this is the Bass 1. And if you're new to T-Rex and you don't know, T-Rex has always had this processor. This is the T-Rex 1, and it is a very well respected and very, very, very good all-in-one mastering processor. Okay, that's the T-Rex 1. Well, now they brought out the Bass 1. And it is specifically designed to work on bass material. Okay, let me reset. So what have we got? Well, it can work on a frequency range between 10 Hertz and 300 Hertz, and you can tune in the low and the high to focus in on a band of frequencies, but it's all down the bottom end. 10 Hertz to 300 Hertz maximum. Okay, this gives you downward compression where the loudest things over threshold get crushed. This gives you upward compression where the things below threshold get brought up. Okay, and this focus control is actually stereo width as it is, and this is making it more and more and more and more, and now it's mono. So more and more towards mono. Now it's monoing the bottom end frequency range that's being worked on. The definition control, which has a heavy and light mode, it just exaggerates whatever the compressor's doing, whether it's doing downward or upward compression. And this is just your output. Okay, now the drive control, let me just put this up. So we're working on 80 hertz to 300 and put the solo in so we just hear the signal passing through the 80 to 300 hertz frequency range. We've got drive, which is distortion. Let's turn the harmonics down. Drive, which is distortion. Okay, and the harmonics can be brought in for that. There is a sub for the harmonics that can be brought in, but unless this is up somewhere around 80 hertz and your octave is lower at 40, you're not going to, it's just mush really. But if we do it subtle, we can get a nice octave growl on the harmonics below the lowest frequency here. Like that, and then we've got, let's turn it off, then we've got the analog saturation here, which again the harmonics works with. It's probably fair to say the harmonics works nicer with the saturation than the distortion, but again we can bring in that octave sub, but again with the caveat that if you overcook this and your lowest frequency is too low, then the octave below will be just mush and a mess. Yep, so that's that end of things there. Okay, so look, if I set this to operate, I can type values in between, say, 35 hertz, 35 hertz at the bottom end, and let's do the top end at, say, 200. Okay, now it's operating on 35 to 200 hertz. We can hear it with the solo, that band frequency range. This is downward compression. It's going to crush things over threshold, the loudest, which is the kick, so it's squashing that kick you can hear. And this definition control just exaggerates whatever the compressor's doing. So this is acting almost like a gate. It's gating the lowest. It's exaggerating what's going on with this compressor. So it's reducing the low level signal. So it's almost like the kick, the louder kick being squashed is being sort of gated almost. Then if we use upward compression, it's going to raise up the stuff lower than the threshold. The kick won't be crushed. So it's bringing up the stuff underneath the kick. Let's bring that synth up a bit. Let's add a bit of saturation to that. And some definition. And we're on the full mono there. Okay, now I'm going to turn off the solo and bypass it. We'll just hear the real material. And I'll drop it in. And you can hear it's bringing in that. I mean, I'm not overcooking this thing, but it is bringing in this real bottom end rumble there. Yeah, that's the bass one. It's a really interesting little processor, this actually. Really interesting. Bass one. Okay, now this one is dual spring. It's another real good one. I love this module, this plugin. There's an input control, there's an output control, there's a dry wet control. We'll set that at about 80%. And then there are two separate spring units. They're both identical, but just coloured different. And there's a blend control. You can have all of that one, or blend whatever percentage of either together. And I suppose thinking about it, you could use automation in your DAW to do a morph in real time between one spring into the other spring tone, right? So to evaluate the springs, we'll just listen to one because they're both the same. So there are 5 different spring types. I'm going to put them on full length for you to hear this. Okay, and we're at 80% wet. Okay, so this is lead. Iron. Copper. Silver. And the finest of all, gold. Okay, now the first 4, they sort of start darker and get progressively brighter in the spring buoying tone, like the actual sound of the spring vibrating becomes brighter and brighter and sort of higher up the treble frequencies. But there are other tonal differences between them as well, in terms of the overall tone of the metallic sound of the spring in the space, as well as the decay tone, etc. The gold one, I'm convinced, is the AKG BX emulation that IK Multimedia have used in one other product. I think it was the Sunset Sound. It sounds exactly like it, and it's a very, very good emulation of an extremely high-end spring unit. Absolutely cracking that. So put the length back to normal, and the tone control, it's just darker that way, brighter that way. So let's have a quick listen. Iron. The copper one. The silver. And finally the gold one. Yeah, I'll set that back to straight ahead. But the real fun comes in when you start using very short spring lengths combined with this stretch, which kind of time stretches sort of thing, the very, very short spring. And then you start straying into that whole lexicon resonant chords territory from the old days. Yeah, it gets really interesting then, right? And finally the gold one. And the mono control, it just puts it into mono. As I said already, I showed that very, very useful, particularly for doing mono room drum tones and things like that. So yeah, and there's a pan. So you know, you can do some really interesting things. You know, you can set two of them up with a short length, tune them. And then you get a sort of robot-like tone between the two different pitches. I mean, it's really cracking stuff. Or you could just go with something like the two gold ones, you know, and just have one shorter than the other, one darker and longer than the other, and sort of just have a balance between them. Yeah, all that kind of thing, yeah. It's an absolutely cracking unit, this. You've got two springs and you can combine the two. Absolutely brilliant. Love this unit. That is the dual spring. Okay, and this one is Channel Strip X. It's an all-in-one channel strip, suitable for anything from vocals to drums to guitar, and it gives you everything you need on a channel in a single plug-in footprint. And as you can see, it's quite closely related to Master Match X that we looked at earlier at the start of these 8 new modules. So there's an input with the vintage button to bring in a emulation of an API preamp. There's a DS here, and look, I've not used it, but it looks like it might have come from the Joe Cicciarelli channel strip, because that too has a DSer with a simple 2-mode switch and a DS, you know, more less control, right? More DS, less DS. So it may have come from the Joe Cicciarelli channel strip, but whatever. Although I've not tried it, I use the Joe Cicciarelli DSer a lot when I use that channel strip, and I use the standalone T-Rex DSer a lot. T-Rex DSers are just very, very, very good, so I can pretty much guarantee this one will work and do the job perfectly well as well. There's an equalizer gain here, that FabFilter style, you know, give me more EQ, back off the EQ, and you can chuck the EQ post the compressor if you want. Then you've got your compression amount with a gain reduction meter, and you can bring in fast compression for the attack. And if you bring in the fast attack, it really does clamp down, like really fast and hard. Otherwise, if you drive the compressor, it really starts to really bring down the hammer. It does, but if you back it off, and it's nice and subtle. Okay. Transit recover does what it says on the tin. Post compressor, it just puts back transients. And then you've got an output control and an on-off switch just to check, you know, what's the sound with it on and off. Over here, the same as on the Master Match X, is the stereo enhance section with the monomaker. Now look, I don't really need to go into it again because I've shown you this on the Master Match X, but just in case somebody jumps forward to look at the review of this and they don't watch the Master Match X review, basically this is a stereo enhancer This is mono, this is full stereo enhancement, and 0 default is your regular amount of stereo information coming through the track. The mono maker can be set to any frequency from the off frequency, which is 20 Hertz, all the way up to the highest frequency, which is 300 Hertz. Okay. And you can type values in for that as well. So I could type like 200. And whatever you set the mono maker to, unless it's off, then unless this slider is setting the track to mono, anything above mono, narrow stereo, normal amount of stereo, or full wide or enhanced stereo, below the mono maker frequency, it sums to mono. Okay, really, really simple. And it works very well, this. Very well indeed, the stereo enhancer. Although this isn't the best kind of material to show it off to the best effect. Okay, then here we've got the EQ section. Okay, there is a low shelf and a high shelf. And there are 4 peak bands, right? And they all boost or cut by 15 dB. The peak bands exhibit proportional Q. The more you cut, the more you boost, the tighter they get. And they can be, the Q on these can be set to a ridiculously tight Q to do the most incredible surgical stuff if you really want to do that. Okay. Now, what's interesting about EQ is that you've got EQ presets here, and the EQ can be separate from the rest of the channel. So let's say I've set my channel like this amount of drive with the vintage in, that amount of compression. I'll put the EQ post the compressor, bit of de-esser before this section in mode 2 and some transient recover, and then I can switch to different EQs and the rest of the channel stays the same. So does this mono make here. If I were to set this to something particular, I can change EQs. Everything else stays the same and I'm just changing the EQ. And that's really useful because, like, you know, I could set everything up for a vocal, say, and there's my vocal EQ starting point. Then I could say, well, that's the starting point for my vocal EQ. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just bring this dip down more here and push the air up a bit more. And then I'm going to add a new EQ preset for that called Vocal 1. Okay. And then I go, okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring that low shelf down a bit and the peak band just after it down a bit. So we've got a little bit more of a low bump. The bump is lower down and we're shelving off further down the frequency. So we've got a warmer bottom end, deeper bottom end, right? And then I'm going to save that as, not VAX, vocal 2. And then I'll say, okay, now this dip here to around 1.5K, I'm going to actually bring that up to here to 2.5K and then bring my shelf up and actually reduce the shelf a bit, right? And then I'm going to save that as Vox 3. And I've got 3 different versions of my vocal EQ. And as it plays, I can leave, everything here will stay the same and I can just jump to load these 3 different variations on the vocal EQ and everything, and I can hear that with all the rest of the channel staying exactly the same, and make a judgment about which EQ to use. And then let's say I decide that's the one I want to go with, then I can just easily get rid of that one, delete, get rid of it, and get rid of that one, delete. And then I've got my final Vox 2 vocal EQ with the rest of the channel, and I saved the entire thing as a preset called My Vocal or whatever. You know, really, really clever to separate the EQ out like that. Very nice indeed. And that is Channel Strip X. It's a cracking little channel, as I say. I really, really like this plugin, this module. Yeah, fantastic stuff. And that's Channel Strip X. Okay, this one is Lo-Fi Punch, and I absolutely love this plugin. I really do. You've got an input, you've got an output, a lo-fi control and compression. Then there are these 3 controls here, and then these further adjusters here. Dry and wet control and a reset. So let's start by listening to the different types of lo-fi. This is Vintage Crush. Yeah, we're on fully wet at the moment, so we're listening to the signal passing entirely through this processor. Okay, that's Vintage Crush, and then there's the 8-bit. Okay, there's a filter at drive and width. Compressor next. And this compressor, it really does spank. Let me turn this stuff off and just listen to it. Yeah, really, really spanky compressor if you want it to go that way. Okay, and then we've got these controls here. And this is the sort of star of the show, the pitch, in combination with the other things up here, really. Then let's have some of it blended in with the dry. I love this lo-fi punch, it's fantastic. It really is a great little plug-in this. Get some really interesting sounds out of it. Lo-fi punch. Okay, and finally, this is Pusher, which is a 4-band saturation and distortion plugin. Very interesting one, this. The 4 bands are identical, and these are the bandwidth adjusters up here. So there's the purple band and the green band, the red band and the gold band. And you just adjust this to, like you would with a multi-band compressor, to assign which frequency area each of the bands is working on. If you only want to use one of the bands, you can in fact focus in, like say I'm on the green band now, on a very, very narrow band of frequencies to work on. This is now the green band working on 295 to 332 Hertz. Okay, so you can do that if you want to. Okay, there's an input control, an output control, there's a dry wet, there's a band bleed, which does what it says on the tin. If you've got more than one band working, it will allow bleed between the bands to spill over into each other. And the master, attack and release controls are here for the 3 envelope controls on each of the bands, which can be set at a negative or positive value. Okay, and the 3 envelope controls are for the 3 parameters of each band: the colour, the drive and the level of the saturation or distortion leaving that band. So I will isolate the green band again, and let's put it from, say, 200 hertz up to nearly 2K, around there, right? Fairly wide band of frequencies. And then let's have a listen to the different types of saturation. There are 5 different types, A, B, C, D, and E, and we'll give it a fair amount of drive. Right, here we go. Fully wet. All right, here we go. Okay, and there are 4 bands. So if you want to, I could put band, adjust my frequencies for what frequency area each band is going to do. And then I could have band 1 on saturation type A, band 2 on B, band 3 on C, and band 4 on D, or maybe E, or whatever. And they can be separate like that, okay, with different amounts of drive, whatever you want, different amounts of da-da-da-da. But you can, say, link these 2 bands together, and now they'll keep their separate saturation types. This is doing C and this is doing E, but their controls become summed. And I can link this one in with the other 2. So these 3 are now linked, but this will still do saturation type B, this will do C, and this will do E, but their controls are all now summed. Yeah? Or I could link these 2 together, and this will do saturation A, this will do B, but their controls are summed, and these 2 are summed, but this one is doing C and this is doing E, etc. You can do it in any sort of order you like. Now let's turn that one off and turn that one on. Now these 3 are linked, and this one's independent, and these 3 are linked, but each doing a different type of saturation. Yeah, it's quite clever, that. Let me just isolate this one again. Okay, so we've got this one on band C, saturation type C, on this frequency band. And now you've got an envelope control for each of the 3 parameters. That's the attack and the release. Master for the envelope controls for the parameters. So if I put this up on a fairly slow attack and fairly fast release. So you can see it's bringing the colour on with the attack of 30 milliseconds and backing off at 122. So it comes up and backs down quite quick. But I can hold on to that colour longer at its full amount. Yeah, so this is like how fast the value comes on, if this is set in a positive way, how fast the value comes on and how much it rolls off after it's reached the maximum value that it gets up to with the amount of envelope it's being given. Oh, I set that in a negative value like this. And it's just the other way around. It's rolling off that value from whatever I've set it to at this amount of speed and bringing it back after when it recovers at whatever speed that is set to. Etc. And you've got that envelope control for each of the 3 parameters to mess with. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting plugin. This probably takes more time to really intuitively start to begin to understand than any of the other of the 8 new modules. Okay, it's quite. I mean, if you just use a single band, it can be quite obvious, but this can do some really interesting stuff. And if you look at the presets, they've got presets like all different. Each band will be different. Beat and tape and fantasy, distorted guitar bus, inverted saturation, old radio. This one, for example, snare and hat enhancer. So it will do things like old radio, where it gives you just an old sound. That's one band operating at fully wet between this frequency of 265 Hz and 1.7K. With B-type saturation, not much of it. Okay, and that's sort of a fairly obvious one, but it's got things like this, snare and hat enhancer. What this is doing is it's adding drive of the C-type here in this area, sort of 227 Hz to 958, almost to 1K, and then right up at the top from 5K up, it's got saturation again here. Okay. So it's sort of giving saturation to the really high sizzle frequencies and this sort of lower mid area between 200 and 1K to enhance the snare and hat. Yeah, so it's going to grit up the hat and the snare body frequencies, just give them a bit of sort of grit. So it does all sorts of things, this. It's a really interesting little plugin. And that is Pusher. And that takes us back to the beginning, to Master Match X, the first of the 8 new modules that we looked at earlier. Although this is an instance of Master Match X running as a standalone plugin inside my DAW, rather than as a module working inside the T-Rax standalone suite as we saw it earlier. Okay, so yeah, that is T-Rax 6. Here it is running as a plugin inside my DAW. I've got, this is a plugin instance of T-Rax strapped across my final left-right bus with a chain of processors loaded into it, and I'm mixing into this mastering chain in real time, which a lot of people like to do. So you can load up T-Rax as a plugin, put a chain of effects into it, and you can mix into it on your final bus. You can strap it across a bus for drums or vocals or a group of instruments, whatever you like. And with this new sort of compact and bijou layout GUI that they've got now, they're very much encouraging you to think about also using T-Rax as a mix tool on individual channels for vocals, guitars, individual drums, things like that. And it kind of makes sense actually, because if you look at this bass channel here, there's the synth at the top, and then there are these 6 individual processors, these 6 individual plugins, providing a mix chain after the synth. The synth is mixing into that. But there's no way that I can save these 6 individual plugins together as a mix chain, as a preset, to load onto other bass channels. You can't do that. I can only save the entire channel, which will save the synth with all those plugins and the sends and everything like that. But I can't save that chain of individual plugins all together as a preset. But instead of using 6 individual plugins like that, if I load a single plugin instance of T-Rax onto that channel, I can then load up a bass preset from the mix factory presets as a starting point and tweak it, or just use it as is, or I can build my own bass mixing chain from scratch and have that single instance of T-Rax on the channel, and that will be my mix chain for the bass, and that can be saved and loaded onto any other bass channel in the future. All those processors working on the bass with just a single plugin instance of T-Rax. Yeah, it does make a lot of sense, that. Yeah. So yeah, T-Rax works as a plugin. And the choice of modules for T-Rex is fantastic. Look, here's your modules list inside the plug-in version. And there are lots of emulations of famous classics, like there's the 1176, the SSL bus compressor, the SSL 4000 channel strip there, which is switchable between black and brown knob versions. There's the Empirical Labs Distressor emulation. There's the Verymu emulation. There's a couple of Neve EQs. There's some API EQs. The Pultec EQ there, and there's a Sontec mastering EQ, and there's many more. There's the Neve compressor limiter, the bus compressor, whole load of tape machine emulations, the Fairchild, the LA2A, and that's a sort of hybrid. This white channel is a hybrid between the SSL 9000 and there's a rack strip they did, rack channel strip. I can't remember the name of it, but it's a hybrid between the two. But it's a great channel list. They've got some amazing, really high quality emulations. As I say, they'll take the Pepsi Challenge against any of the other usual suspects. But there's also some of their own brand designs, which are fantastic. Really, they do their own stuff, which is great as well, like the ones we've just seen. These are all T-Rex designs that we've just looked at, like the Delay Lab, and Channel Strip X and the Base One and things like that. And another thing people never talk about is their reverbs. But these CSR ones, the Hall, Inverse, Plate and Room, they're 4 reverbs dedicated to a specific type of reverb with loads of parameters. And they sound very, very good. You can think of them as early, they're like sort of classic Lexicon or TC Electronics or things like that from the old days, yeah. They're very, very, very good digital reverbs, So, yeah, the choice of modules is fantastic. And if you don't still grasp the way T-Rex works, all these modules work inside T-Rex, whether it's the suite working as a plugin in your DAW or whether it's the standalone mastering suite working outside your DAW for mastering. But all these modules can be installed as individual plugins in their own right in VST3 format, audio unit or AAX. Okay. So yeah, T-Rex 6. Fantastic stuff. And just a couple of other things. Whether you're using the suite as a plugin like this, individual processors within that suite, where relevant, on stereo tracks, or the individual plugin versions of the modules inserted across tracks by themselves, where relevant and on stereo tracks, they will allow you to choose between left-right processing, and you can, if you want, have the left and the right separate or equal, and mid-side processing, and you can process mid and side differently. Yeah. Also, all T-Rex plugins have this wonderful infinite undo and infinite redo, and it literally is infinite. You can go right the way back, even if you've been working for 3 days, making endless changes. If you click this undo button, it will undo, going back over 3 days of changes that you made. And you can always get back to the very, very first instance of where you first inserted the plugin or the suite. And you can infinitely redo to always get back to the last thing you did. And then you've got this wonderful bank copy and paste thing. Okay? Both on the suite and individual plugins. And it allows you to copy the current state, which is in A, for example, and then paste it into B, C, or D, paste it into B, make some changes to B, and then as you listen, you can jump between A and B, which will be slightly different because you've tweaked the B copy, and decide which of the two you want. And you can do that with up to 4 instances. So I can copy B or A and paste it into C, and then I can copy B or A or C and paste it into D. And then I've got 4 different copies I can jump between. So the compressor, for example, on A could be different there, and different there, and different there, and then different on the 4th one. And then as I listen, I can jump between the different ones and decide which one I want to use in real time. It's a great feature, that. Yeah. So, there are lots of other little things to do with T-Rex that are just general to the program, not specifically to this version 6. Yeah. All right. So there you go. That's T-Rex 6. Okay. And as I always say at the end of these longer reviews or tutorials, are you not entertained?
Are you not entertained? Are you not entertained? Is this not why you are here?
I mean, are you not entertained? Isn't this what this is? Is this not why you were here? A proper, full, in-depth review where I really tell you the stuff. Yeah. I mean, I've had this T-Rex now since last week. And if I wanted to, when the press embargo was lifted, like the Thursday before last weekend, I could have put one of the first reviews on YouTube, had it right up there at 11 o'clock in the morning, Central European time. Oh, right, I've got the first review of T-Rex 6 out there on YouTube. But it would be for clicks. But you know what I'm like? I like to learn something really properly, and then fine-tune the video until I get a proper video showing you the real stuff, yeah? Okay, so there you go. That's T-Rex 6. Please subscribe. It really helps. Notifications on. And let me know what you think in the comments below. Always keen to hear your comments, and any questions that you want to ask, I'll try and answer them as well. Okay, so I'll see you for more videos soon, yeah? Okay, ciao.